de Qabil Lil-Niqash, un média qui a couvert des débats. Et nous avons en dernier lieu un jeune Tchadien qui est un créateur de contenu scientifique tchadien et qui est spécialiste des médias alternatifs. Et il va maintenant pouvoir nous expliquer de quelle manière les nouveaux médias contribuent à instaurer de l'espoir en Afrique. Il a créé des contenus sur les poèmes de Asmaï et j'ai suivi cela, un poème qui s'est vu remettre ses lettres de noblesse. Et nous avons eu une discussion concernant la technologie. Nous avons donc suivi son travail. Je vais donc passer la parole à tous les panélistes qui auront tous 10 minutes. Mais si vous avez des questions, nous pourrions ensuite, après avoir donné la parole aux panélistes, nous allons organiser une session de questions-réponses. Nous allons passer la parole à M. Nicolas Hanin sur la contribution des médias à l'élaboration d'un discours d'espoir, notamment les fake news. Dans la culture islamique, c'est quelque chose qui est interdit, quelque chose qui est dangereux. Et nous avons vu cela aujourd'hui. Maintenant que nous parlons de la fabrique de l'espoir, l'espoir, hope, c'est en fait al-amal en arabe. Et al-raja, quant à elle, fait allusion à l'espérance. L'espoir est fondé sur la réalité et c'est quelque chose qui est partagé.
Merci beaucoup, shukran jazilan. Ana asif lurati al-arabiyya khafifa, je vais parler en français. Je voudrais déjà remercier beaucoup les organisateurs de la conférence de l'invitation qu'ils m'ont adressée, de l'organisation de cette conférence, et aussi exprimer l'honneur que je ressens d'être invité à m'exprimer devant vous. Je suis ici parce que j'ai longtemps été journaliste, pendant presque 20 ans. Et j'ai choisi d'exercer le métier de journaliste sur un terrain très particulier qui est la guerre. J'ai été reporter de guerre. Pourquoi? Ça va la traduction? Pourquoi j'ai choisi d'être reporter de guerre et d'aller dans ces endroits dangereux que d'habitude tout le monde fuit? J'ai choisi cela parce que quand vous êtes dans la guerre, vous voyez la réalité, vous touchez du doigt la réalité de l'humanité. Vous voyez le pire de l'homme.
You can see the worst of man because and you can see the best of man because in all wars you are going to find heroes, and it's in the wars that criminals appear as criminals and the heroes discover themselves as heroes. In a war, you can't hide things. All social conventions, all manners, politeness, courtesy, it's the genuine human being that appears before you. And information is used as a weapon. Propaganda, war propaganda, is one of the means that is used by the two parties to push their arguments forward and to lead their fight. That's the reason why that war journalism imposes more rigor, more honesty, because what you say as a war journalist can save lives, because you are going to disseminate the message of massacres, and you can push the world community to stop that massacre. Because if you propagate or if you disseminate the propaganda of an aggressor, you find yourself involved in propaganda, and your position as journalists can facilitate the continuity of the conflict. So the responsibility of the war journalist is very important, and your ethical commitment as a journalist of war is of paramount importance. No journalist in the world has as much power as a war journalist, because a war journalist, we are in a field where people are dying on a daily basis. We have small power between our hands because we cannot stop somebody killing somebody else, but we remain a cornerstone in that event. War journalists, as I said, I practiced for 20 years, then I stopped. I almost died, and I had to stop because 2014 I was in Raqqa city, and I was caught by members of Daesh who kept me as a hostage for more than a year, or almost a year. They kept me in the most terrible conditions you may imagine. I was also tortured. I was lucky to go back home to recover my country, my family, and then I left journalism for good. But I continued to work in a different manner, or in different manners. I have turned a researcher on misinformation and violent contexts. And I took this topic from a moral perspective. Why quality information has an ethical value? Because the responsibility of the journalist has a certain ethical information. They need to make information of quality available, but it is our responsibility together. We are the ones who are going to choose quality programs, quality media, quality newspapers, or give poor quality information on the social media. Still, to go back to the topic of our conference, I do believe that in this information there is a narrative or a discourse of hope. I am probably the only one in the room who is probably not a Muslim, but I have tried to see how we could use Muslim values to encourage quality information and fighting misinformation. As a matter of fact, Muslim religion is based on a transmission of a message that is genuine, that is true, without being altered or modified. And there are many Muslim values also. Punish, sanction misinformation. Lying is a sin, like in many other, creating disorder. Misinformation is also bad because it can create upheaval. Propagation of lies can lead to destruction, and that is a sin in itself. And we also have positive values like patience, to be patient before you disseminate any message. Make sure as-sabr, make sure that this message is genuine, real, and of good interest. And then you have accuracy. Accuracy is a big Muslim virtue. Quality information, and I will close with this, is necessary so that we could hope, especially in Africa, where we have serious governance issues, development issues. We want enlightened choices. That's good for a good governance, so that people can commit to be civic citizens without any ideology. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicolas. Thank you for these words, and you respected the allocated time. So I have two things to keep in mind. You've been a war journalist, and this is very useful. Positively, not to give information of war, but just to give hope, and also to attract the attention and bring peace after war. And this is what I developed concerning the Islamic culture. And this is very deep philosophy against misinformation and fake news. And usually we think how Muslims cannot just implement this culture. So therefore, now I give the floor to Nova Mamal. I talked with her concerning this very particular topic, and two main issues. First of all, the perspective or how Africa is seen by Arab media. How do you perceive the African continent? What is your own experience in this regard? And given your economic background, I think that today we are all building hope in economy and developing our different and respective economies. Good morning to you all, and welcome. I'll be speaking in French for Nicolas. You are really hope. You embody and incarnate hope. Your story is very inspiring. I thank you very much for sharing it with us. I would have loved to have a round of applause, please, for Nicolas. And Nicolas, this correlation that you mentioned between Islam and journalism, media, I have never seen such an approach. It's really constructive and filled with information. Thank you very much, because what you said concerning Islam and journalism is a very good one. Now I go back to Arabic. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, welcome to you all. Now in this morning, the topic for me, and that was raised by one of the organizers, Dr. Islamu. He said, what do you think about having an address as a panelist that will be under the title the journalism, Arab world, and the positive media discourse? I said no at the very beginning. Thank you very much. I don't want to delve into all theoretical aspects. I've been a journalist for more than 25 years. I ask questions, I listen to answers in order to ask more questions, but I do not have an answer to this. And then I said to myself, why not? Let's consider this. I'll go to internet and make some research on the topic, of course, because I didn't have enough answers to the question. And then I noticed one figure that attracted my attention, and this figure pushed me to go to Dr. Salmo and say yes. I had a hidden ear, and I'm replying yes, I'll be taking part to this conference. So the figure is $4.2 billion. So this is the expense as interest rate for their sovereign funds, not because of economy, and not because of its economic situation, but because of the image depicted by international media concerning Africa. The report of Africa No Filter issued in 2024 called this prejudice premium, which means that the word that was written by press agencies in Washington or London or etc. can raise the interest rate for a loan for building a school in Kenya or Guinea. And when we have so many titles concerning conflict and corruption and instability, this image is built within the reports of investors and agencies in charge of the loan, and all this have a direct correlation with bonds and also sovereign funds, which means there will be less capacity on financing education, health, and infrastructure. And this is how the discourse becomes reality in terms of public debt. And this is a very negative discourse and narrative in Africa. And just to say it, I'm not trying to depict things in a very gloomy way, but the Western media is just portraying equation of public debts. Another study that was conducted and in which there was a comparison between the press coverage in elections in Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa. They just compared this with elections in Malaysia and Denmark and Thailand. So it was really shocking. Countries that they have risk files and the other ones who have just close risks, economic and political ones. And the results and findings portrayed that 88% of the articles, international articles and stories covering elections in Kenya, for example, they had a very negative impact. 82%. And for Nigeria, 69%. From Malaysia, 48%. They have the same economic risks, political risks, but then there is a difference and discrepancy in terms of this. And there is another study by Al Jazeera, BBC, and Bloomberg, CNN, and Financial Times, Reuters, and The Economist. You know what it means. These are among the main referential platforms for investment and also for ranking countries. So they just report these information into financial reports and investment reports that have a wide scope of application. This tendency is being repeated, and by repeating it, we have an image that is built, and here we're talking about Africa, and Africa is 1,400,000,000 people, 54 countries, among the quickest rising and emerging economies. But what we receive on our screens in the Arab world, the trilogy of war, health, and hunger. The cost is not just moral. I've just given proofs and evidence that there is a negative consequence, and there is also moral and psychological. Even the investor who does not see on his screen only the images of crisis will not be seeking opportunities in Africa, and the African citizen who does not perceive any positive image and have only tarnished image will become an obstacle, and this will lead to despair concerning development. And this despair is on equal footing with the material hindrances. The motto or the slogan or the title of the 6th edition of the conference is "No Despair from the Mercy of God." This title, and I add to it because since 2 days I had a show, a pre-conference show that I held here in an encounter with Dr. Ibrahim Makri, and he's a member of the Council of Fatwa in the Religious Affairs in Abuja. He was here with us. During the show, he said something that I added to this paper. He said, if doomsday or the judgment day, because this is taken from the Prophet's hadith, and you see that the doomsday is now, it's happening, and you can plant a tree, just plant it, and we cannot despair from the mercy of Allah. And those words set the basis for hope as a practice and personal responsibility. You can have a passing of feeling, but then we need to count on this framework in our journalism to move from focusing on problems to hope making by showcasing the potential and solutions. This spiritual framework, people might say this is sentimental somehow, this is idealistic, utopian, but then I'll give you more ideas, and through the verse or from hadith, we have a scientific origin. In the 70s, the sociologist Johan Dalton noticed that media cover conflicts as journalism and media covered in the 18th century diseases, which means there is a description, detailed description about suffering without taking care of solutions or prevention. And he presented a new concept. He said, we need to set the basis and the foundations for the journalism of peace as an alternative to the journalism and media of war. And he used a very beautiful description. And in every page on the newspaper, there is a page on health. And I think we still do have it. They give the diagnosis, the medicine, and then prevention. We need to have a page of peace. We need to analyze wars and conflicts, but then we need to include the possible solutions. People are eager to heal, to recover their full health, but then they are eager to recover peace. Today we need positive journalism of solutions, and scientific evidence demonstrated that the testing this concept of the Norwegian researcher Johan Galton said that 22 scientific experiences confirmed that this kind of journalism is the journalism of solution, of prevention, to move the feelings of the audience from despair to efficiency. And there has been an increase in the number of contributors and readers by 29%, because people are eager for hope, solutions, and it's up to us to bring it and present it to people. in this kind of journalism. We are still considering that the grassroots and the audience is seeking just yellow tabloids, but this is not the case. People are eager to find solutions, and also practice demonstrated, and I will be sharing with you an example, and this example is still present very much in the minds of Africans and its history. 1994, I think you still remember this date very well. In Rwanda, there is a radio station, RTM, that shows or disseminates very nice songs. And then there were songs describing Tutsi as cockroaches, and talking about wanted people, names and their details, which means 800,000 killed in 100 years between Tutsu and Tutsi. So there was genocide, and through songs people were just carrying the weapon, the blade in one hand and the radio in the other hand. Even the International Penal Court, and they condemned the founders of this radio. This was an instrument of killing, a weapon, because it was disseminated hate messages. And after 2 years, another example, the same place in Burundi, the international community launched a new radio. I'll try to make it right. Omawi Zero, which means hope. And then it calmed down the tensions, the ethnical problems and disputes in this region. And in Kenya, we have another example. We had a radio station that was called Rahma. And a few people just launched this radio in order to disseminate messages that contributed to rehabilitating the youth and reducing the rates of crimes. And the government, in a way or another, they just generalized this radio on the districts, and they achieved phenomenal results in order to rehabilitate the youth and also to move them away from crimes. Journalism is journalism and media is media. However, what changed is the message and also the intent. These are the two main elements that change everything. Of course, you are still expecting the question, where is the Arab world as to Africa? How can we link the two? The Arabic journalism, when it covers Africa, and I'll be very straightforward and blunt, they fall every now and again in the same trap. They just follow international media. We just reduce the whole continent in the three elements, poverty, hunger, and disease. And if we move away from this trilogy, we can just add irregular migration, as if Africa is just producing refugees, victims, and sick people. The Arab media discusses in its bulletins and stories about Africa, but then at the very end of the show, and when the news show, so after politics, climate, etc., and kitchen, and then we can talk about Africa. It is always lagging behind and coming at the last place. And here I'll be talking about the whole Arab world without any exception. If there is an explosion in Mogadishu, or a coup in Mali, or Ebola in Sierra Leone or in Liberia, then there will be large coverage, and Africa will be at the top of the headlines of the news. And then we'll have shows, and we will analyze, and we'll call for experts, etc. Unfortunately, Africa is associated with death and sickness, and not life and hope, not opportunities and success. This is the reality that we need to acknowledge and recognize. I worked very much because I worked through Hurra and Jazeera, and today in Dubai TV, and I know very well how people are running after news. And I still remember when I was working in Hurra, I had the night shift, and I still remember that the correspondent, the journalist from Mogadishu, he was talking with the producer, and he was speaking, and he said, "This is our correspondent from Somal, and we had other things to cover." And he was just commenting and saying, "I'll call you later. I will call you later." When did he answer his calls? Only when he said there is an explosion in Mogadishu and we have so many injured and victims. And then he replied to his calls. We are not mentioning Africa in good things. We only mention Africa in times of calamities. And we have a cultural reason for this. Almost. I'll be done very soon. Almost there. Just the recommendations. And also for structural reasons. What does it mean to have structural reasons? And so the Arab channels do not have permanent offices in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. There is just seasonal coverage, covering only tragedies, and we count very much on foreign agencies, Reuters, AFP, and Associated Press, and we are importing the lens from which the news have been analyzed. We are seeing things from the same angle, and we are just producing this in Arabic as if it was our own. And also the outlook of the Arab journalists specialized in African issues. Sometimes they do not know the difference between Grey crisis and Darfur crisis, and I will end up with the recommendations, Mr. Abdel Qadir. And the result of this is that it covers Africa, but it does not discuss with or speak to Africa. And we have 10 African members in the Arab League, and from the Comoros Islands to other. And we have so many cultural language bonds and historical bonds, but then, and usually the Arab-African relation should be very deep and solid, but then we have a gap, and we need to fill in the gap. And I move to the recommendations before giving you the floor, Mr. Abdel Qadir. I'll give you just the recommendations before ending my address. First of all, a few recommendations, because this session is very useful, and thank you very much to the organizing committee, because you thought about media in Africa and also linking it with hope. And this is the logo somehow or slogan of this conference, and I suggest a few points. And I presented them to the organizers of the initiative in Nouakchott for journalism of hope. We will be training 54 journalists from African and Arab countries, young journalists, for the principles of constructive journalism, inspired by the Abu Dhabi Forum for Peace. And we need a hope, a platform, a digital one in Arabic and English, and why not? We can add French. It will be just like a press agency for solutions in Africa that will combine success stories, positive experiences, and to send them to the institutions of press. And those institutions, when they find a good product, they can just broadcast it or disseminate it, because we need a good intent, and we need a very positive, good structure for positive content. And why not the prize of Benbeya for the journalism of hope, to pay tribute to the best journalists who incarnate journalism of hope covering Africa. And I have only one recommendation, Mr. Abdel Qadir, just one element. And when the journalist knows that there is esteem attached to those who share the story of hope, they would just alter their way of covering events, and we need to have a policy, African policy, the commitment of our institutions in order to bring Africa in its news, not at the end, but to have deep stories and to be among the headlines. And now I will end up my discussion. Thank you very much. We will get back to you if you allow me. Well, thank you very much for these words. A round of applause. So we went beyond the 5 minutes of time. Now we'll go back to recommendations afterwards.
Especially that you will have a chance to answer questions. And if we go back to the title of this conference, the making of hope, and you spoke about some good stories. I hope we can have time to discuss them. Now, we wanted to respect the time, so I'm going to give the friend who represents creation of content, alternative info. As the professor said, Africa has seen its image tarnished because of the traditional journalism. But today we have the alternative journalism, which is led by youth, and we have with us Habib Idris, a content creator. We'll talk about your call as a mathematician, but you can tell us, and you have to relate this with hope. So how can we, with the digital revolution, in the name and prayers on Muhammad, our prophet, I am surprised to find myself next to journalists, while I am not a journalist. I am a content creator, educational content creator. Some of you know me on TikTok or Facebook or YouTube. I give some mathematical clues. My role is to disseminate data and give hope for whom mathematics or sciences are difficult. I'm not going to be long. We lost his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, Africa is the youngest continent in the world. This youth is a strength and at the same time a responsibility. In this context, the new media, such as digital platforms, educational content, play an important role in the construction of African hope. We live a silent revolution. A mobile phone today has become a library, a bookstore, a school, and even a lever of social ascension. The question is not to know whether or not new media influences society, but the question is, where are we heading? The new media can magnify rumors, fear, and superficiality, but they can also build trust, pass on knowledge, and awaken consciousness. When the digital is worth in education, it reduces inequalities in accessing knowledge. It links or ties the rural with the urban. It gives visibility to the African talent. It gives confidence to the whole generation. I have seen kids understanding complex equations in mathematics just through a video. And I am so happy when kids send me a message telling me I have understood what I haven't understood for years. I have seen, thanks to digital education, a lot of hope. This is how the new media can build the hope, by transforming access to knowledge, by democratizing excellence, and by making success accessible and visible. A person who is well informed is less likely to be manipulated, is more autonomous. Enlightened youth is an actor of stability and peace. I want to thank Sheikh Ben Beya for his commitment for cohesion and dialogue, as well as His Excellency, the President of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, for his patronage. I want also thank Marshal Mohammed Driss Déby, President of the Republic of Chad. Allow me to formulate some concrete resolutions so that new media could be sustainable and nourish hope. Create an African network that is educational, a platform that can teach kids with the educational content of quality. Number two, integrate in a massive way youth to big conferences like this one. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of young people in this room, unfortunately. Invite every year a quota of students and new innovators so that they could participate actively in the debate. 3, launch a program entitled Telephone for Knowledge. Encourage government and private partners to use the smartphone as a pedagogical tool, an official pedagogical tool. 4, give value to positive content. That means set up recognition and rewarding mechanism for people who create content for social cohesion and education. I'm not thinking about me alone. I'm thinking about all content producers. Make or train kids and youth to be digital critical agents, because the idea is not only to learn but to analyze. Africa doesn't have a problem of talent. It needs structures that would magnify the talents. New media, well-orientated, can be the basis of a more instructed, more confident, and more stable continent. African hope is not going to come from noise. It's going to come from knowledge. And when knowledge is freely moving, the future is no longer a worry, but a promise. So, the gentleman you see before me, I haven't been trained to be a teacher, not at all. I work in oil field, and I'm an engineer in civil aviation. But if you see me in education, it is because there is a lot of work to be done for the African youth. Education, teaching, for me is a passion. And I love to share my knowledge with the people. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. You have finished in the time that was allotted. We are going to now move and give more time to our lady here. What is interesting in your recommendations, which complement the recommendations of the lady by my side? So we can start with what's Nicola has suggested, the truth about information. So it's important to see your recommendations handed over to the organizing committee. You said you are not a journalist. We have only journalists here. You are just a content creator. But you are the incarnation of the new information. You said that there are no youth. Well, this is a message for Nouakchott. We need African communication with involvement of youth. I'm going to give you the floor. I want to make a little comment. Mohammed, you have, from the beginning, you have made a differentiation between a journalist. You said, I'm not a journalist like you, but you are doing a deeper work that is adapted to the new reality, probably better than what I'm doing or what Nicola is doing. Maybe we are complementary. Where were you when I was a kid? I have always suffered with the third type of equations, root equations, etc. And it's wonderful what you are doing to help. This is what we need today for our kids and for the youth. You wanted to finish your recommendations, I believe. Now, as a matter of fact, I believe that I finished my presentation in a very quick way, my recommendations, and it is going to be handed over to the organizing committee. All I want is to focus on, as Arab reporters, we have an opinion only in wars, and that's true, because that's not good for Africa, because we deprive our society of our strategic ally, which is Africa. We have learned a lot of lessons from Africa, and it is high time we return something to Africa. Behind the microphone, we should give more time to Africa so that we could relate those inspiring stories of hope. Thank you very much. These are what we call successful stories, and I have thought about some of the ideas about the creation of the concept of the journalism of hope. You talked about the success stories, and as you said, African or Western news give the bad things about Africa. In the news, always we talk about Africa as crisis, famine. How can you highlight these stories, how to propose interesting stories for youth that could help promote society rather than just relate the tragedies of the African world? I spoke in Arabic when it comes to the dissemination of content. If we take the Arab song, we can talk about Kulthum. We can renew Kulthum, an Arab poet, but there isn't only the past. There is new things, and that's what the world needs especially African youth.
I can say that 90% of young people is present in social media. Although this young segment is dropping out schools, we can just catch up with them through social media. A few of us, or certain people of us, are using social media in bad faith, but then we can use them for educational purposes. The youth that you are witnessing are skilled, and each one of us can just differentiate between things in order to raise awareness by using social media, in order to allow those young people to be really conscious of the situation. In my case, I've been teaching mathematics, and everybody was just having an apprehension, fearing mathematics. And this is what should be paranormal. We can just disseminate it and to simplify it and make it accessible so that anybody can have access to it, to understand and grasp its notions. Instead of using social media in order to dance, sing, insult people, why not use them in order to disseminate information and education? I'm not the only content creator. On a daily basis, we have hundreds of content creators just join this circle of education, and this is something very important. If this is not enough, we would need to sensitize people so that we can use social media for educational purposes instead of stagnating in futility. Yes, it will be very interesting, and you gave the example of mathematics. Is there in the room anybody who would like to take the floor? Yes, indeed, we have a problem because we're coming to the end of this session. Mohamed Khalil, former Minister of Religious Affairs in Tunisia. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Naufa and her address that is so insightful and consolidated with concrete experiences. And most importantly, Mr. Nicola, I'd like to thank him for his testimony that is so moving and sincere. I would like to ask him a question. If a war journalist, can a war journalist be neutral and convey the reality on the field as it is? Or does he need to submit to the different difficulties of the editorial line of the press agency that recruited him? Thank you very much, Excellency Minister. And now I give the floor to Professor Sheikh Argaya, who is the President of the Council of the Federation in the Ivory Coast, of Islamic Affairs in Ivory Coast. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, I'm really honored and delighted to thank and express my sincerest thanks to No Voice,
يشرفني
I'm I'm really honored to express my deepest gratitude and thanks to His Eminence, Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya, for the invitation in order to partake in the proceedings of the International Conference for Peace, in its sixth edition, and allow me to hail the efforts of the scholars, mashayikh, thinkers who contributed to the success of this conference. And I convey to His Eminence the greetings from all religious beliefs, faiths, and creeds in Africa to His Eminence, and to wish him and implore Almighty to have health and welfare. I'd like to ask the French reporter, dear friend, Africa is a continent that is very rich. It has several diverse mineral resources, mineral and environmental resources. We sometimes tend to convey an image that is gloomy about Africa as a continent of misery. However, as opposed to so many sayings, the continent is not really poor, as it was disseminated by media that are spreading the neo-colonialist and imperialist message. And here I'm alluding at Western media in particular, and most importantly Radio France Internationale and France 24. Just to name but a few. So my question, as a consultant for African affairs, the Universal Human Rights and World Service Authority that is based in Washington, D.C., it is an institution of human rights that is not following any superpower in the world. But we know how it functions there. For the story, the president of this organization, David Gallup, he's an American who is among the most renowned counselors or advisors in the White House. And during the Vietnam War, when the American authorities imposed military service, mandatory one, on citizens to go and fight another nation, Vietnam, this person stepped in and he said, no, as an American citizen, I cannot fight another citizen of another country. And he was imprisoned for this. And when he was released from the prison, and after the defeat of Americans in Vietnam, he founded the Human Rights War Service Authority. So this is not an institution that is similar to the others that you know. My question, first of all, Africa is a rich continent by its mineral resources, environmental resources. It is exploited by multinationals based in Western countries. Second of all, the leaders, African leaders, progressist ones, who are fighting relentlessly for the emancipation of the African people, aspired at human dignity and national sovereignty for a real political and economic and cultural independence of the nation, have been assassinated, killed, murdered. Third, we are creating rebellions, and we support actions, destabilizing actions via terrorist groups, just to put pressure on the government of people who would like to move away from colonialism and to be independent. Fourth, most of the wars that were led or waged in Africa are proxy wars. And as you well know, Mr. Journalist, that you have a large experience, you have accumulated so many years as a war correspondent. What have you done of all the analysis that you enumerated in your report? Last question, apparently. We cannot hear the voice. No voice in the microphone. Microphone, please. In the name of Allah, greetings. I have three questions. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you today. Mr. Nicola, good morning. Praise be to God for having survived the kidnapping of the terrorist group, and we thank Allah that you are safe after being kidnapped for 1 year. My question: what is the definition of the media war? When a war is waged in any region, there are so many fake news and misinformation and propaganda that accompany war. Is there any credibility, or do you suffer from pressure not to convey the right information at that very particular moment? And Nofa, how can we apply the discourse of positive hope in Arab media in order to have a better impact on society? And for Sheikh Mohammed Habib, how can young people in Africa use media or alternative media in order to consolidate dialogue and set bridges between all the parties within the continent? Thank you very much. Microphone, please. Microphone. So I'll start by answering the question of His Excellency Minister. Thank you very much for asking the question. It is really important. The editorial line, I would like to answer in a provocative way, because the editorial line is not really the heart of the issue. Every single agency has its own line, and the journalist who is producing information can never be neutral. We are all subdued to our own biases, and we have convictions, of course. So there is no necessity of objectivity. We cannot be objective, and we are influenced by our own thoughts, but we have an obligation of being honest. Neutrality is not the purpose of journalism. It may seem really surprising for you, but in a democracy that is functioning, we are not seeking neutral media, because opinion press is accepted. But what is really a condition is a diversity. We need to have all opinions being expressed, and also to be available, and for the citizens need to have access to the press. And when you go buy your newspaper in the morning, you have your own editorial line. Maybe you will buy a leftist or a right-wing newspaper. But what is really important indeed is to have the choice between left and right. And concerning the question on regarding pressure, and this will be a transition to the next one. I cannot talk about the others or for or on behalf of the others. I can only talk about my case. And well, I was lucky enough not to be subdued to any kind of pressure. And probably it is possible that this is the case for others, but I was not living this experience. Now, you talked about the wealth and the richness of Africa. I agree. Africa is indeed very rich, but unfortunately it is condensed and filled with poor people. And this gap, we need to address it. And I have the feeling that you're interested in reducing this gap. And I do agree totally. The wealth of the continent needs to be accessible for all the population of Africa, and you criticized certain media outlets from my country. I haven't been paid by my government. I do not work for the government. I am criticized, or I criticize my government. This is the freedom that we enjoy in our democracy. But I appreciate RFI and France 24. However, you have the right to criticize them, and also to have a negative vision of these media outlets. We all have our opinions and our freedom. Now, I join my voice to yours concerning the last point. I think that it is really necessary for African people to decide their faith and to have their political choices in total freedom. And I agree with you on this point. You can answer the question. So your question, how can for the journalism of hope be embodied in the journalists and media institutions in the Arab world? We need to alter our vision of dealing with information in Africa. And I will share with you an equation. In Africa, there are so many catastrophes, calamities, irregular migration. So these are the focal points. We can alter this equation. There are less diseases because the health sector is evolving in the African continent. We can also reduce the catastrophes and disasters theme, because it's also decreasing, and we cannot just place all the focus on them, and gradually we can move to the journalism of hope. And instead of sharing the story in Libya about the ethnic problems and divide between tribes, etc., we can just focus on the story of one Libyan who had a positive impact on the neighborhood, for example. So the editorial line or policy in Africa needs to be changed, and we need to change the mindset of dealing with the African topics, and we add to it the element of positivity during news, and there will be, of course, a share for disasters and problems and diseases, but then we need to shed light on the brighter side of Africa, in which we will see in those strategies, positive ones, that change the lives of so many Africans with all its wealth. Before going back to the room,
I'm going to try. I will go back to the audience, but time is limited. We give half a minute for questions. Otherwise, I will stop you. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Your question is how digital education media can be used by youth. Today, the telephone has become the ultimate companion of each and every one of us. 80%, if not more, don't watch TV. Even if it's a question of information, they look for information in the social media. Now the question, how can these youth use social media for educational purposes? Parents can suggest to them to follow such a platform, such educational programs. The world today is geared towards the digital. With time, I'm sure that schools are going to disappear. People are learning online today in Mauritania, which is online. Even if it is an official school, but there is an online school that we call here Madrasat Razana or Rasana. When you enroll your son in the school, he can follow classes through a phone, a tablet, or a computer. To push youth to use social media for educational purposes, parents have the responsibility to do so, and they need to sensitize their kids. I think I have answered your question. I'll go back to the room. From here I can see everybody. I will start with the gentleman with the pink shirt. Introduce yourself and ask your question. Go ahead. Give him the microphone, please. Well, it's orange, it's not pink. It's orange, it's not pink. So introduce yourself. My name is Salah. My question is why youth goes to the United States to achieve the American dream. Why can't we have an African dream that Africans can achieve, and how can positive journalism help? The lady behind him, go ahead. Peace be upon you. Khawla al-Hakim. My question: how can establish balance, the good and the bad things in the media? Repeat. How we can balance a discourse that relates truth, facts, and still be positive or bring in hope. Yes, sir. Peace be upon you.
African American delegation for the International Coalition of Peace and Reconciliation. This is to Ms. Tawfiq. If this is to Ms. Tawfiq, you spoke of giving esteem. When you speak of hope in the media, it reminds me of the story or the hadith when the Prophet was saying how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was showing the angel a picture of the world with his influence. And the angel said, surely no man could ever go wrong here. And then he showed the angel a picture of the world without his influence, and the angel said, surely no man could ever go right. And so it is my belief that the media's responsibility is to show the world the perspective that God has, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has of it. So there's two questions I have for you. One is it reasonable to ask those who lack that faith in Allah to show that perspective of the world? The second question is to give esteem to those who choose to, right? You said one of your recommendations was to give esteem to those who choose to show that perspective. How can that be systematically done, right, so that journalists are given that esteem? And what ways would you say that esteem could happen? Like how could you enforce that?
Thank you. Juste après, juste, voilà.
The one right in front of you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Alhamdulillah to God that good things happen. I want to bounce back on the gentleman from France to tell him that hope can be built. And for years, the basic problem I'm facing is the Muslims in France. How can we do so that we can prepare them for the future? And as France is meritocracy, our youth who lives in France need to be prepared to take the good positions by building the schools like Saint-Denis School. Why rich countries, Arab countries, don't build the best schools to allow our kids to integrate the biggest universities, to have the best positions in Occidental or Western countries and their countries of origin? And I think the example of Belgium, who has created a higher education school, and Islam. So you have this question: how can we facilitate access to African kids, access to quality? Peace be upon you.
Salam, and I am here too from the United States as an educator. And more than once I've heard this comment, and I would like to understand better. My question is directed to Mr. Hamid. When you stated Africa is the youngest continent in the world, I've heard that more than once here in the conference and would like for you to expound on it as it relates for me when I'm dealing with students. That is not my perspective. So I'm trying to understand better what that means and how that is related and portrayed in the media.
Good morning in Tunisian language. I talk to our journalists. I will speak in Arabic. I have 2 points to raise. The first one is how can the media change the relationship between Africans in African cities? I have seen countries where how can we change that mentality between cities in Africa and citizens from Africa? Can the media put an end to the language of hatred and violence and exchange it for language of love and friendship or brotherhood? Without encroaching on what my friend said in his recommendations, we need to have a platform for youth to have videos, content about the hope of kids, youth, and their achievements. And this platform should be professional and open to them. And the example is what Muhammad is doing. He has reached millions of people through his platform. And as he said, it's not costing much. Today, we are not asking for TV channels that have millions of dollars. We are not asking for that. And we have the same request, a platform for youth where they can speak their voice and they can reach in 2 languages or 3 languages if possible, first of all. Second, she's speaking in English. Okay, she switched it to Arabic. We need a political will. We need a political will where, so that Africa comes out from the frame that was built for her. That is to say, sickness, famine, and corruption, etc. When there is a political will among Africans, we don't expect other countries to tell us what to do. Somebody said, why wouldn't Europeans invest? Africa is rich. Just a good governance, a good management of the wealth of Africa can help. We have all the resources. This platform for youth with a strong political will to be strong, efficient. I'm sure we can do that. To answer the lady from Tunisia, I gave 2 examples or 3 examples about how the media can create a war and create peace. The microphone is very, very dangerous. Remember the 1 million victims of the Hutu and the Tutsis last century. 2 years later, the same area. We are not outside of that same, from Rwanda to Burundi, and there was the radio channel of hope, and that has led to the reconciliation between the Hutsis and the Tutsis. And I think that social media can disseminate this language of hope and brotherhood. Now, the second question was the culture of hatred. This is a real problem, and I know what you are talking about in Tunisia. I think there is a problem in how we appreciate Africa. The Tunisians would say how these Africans are coming to, why do you call them Africans? You are an African. There is a question of education and culture. There are some African countries who don't understand other African countries and who don't talk to them, that are mainly communicating with the other bank of the Mediterranean basin. But I think that the media can play a role. Half a minute, please, half a minute.
So I'll try to answer the question of the lady. She was saying, when I was speaking about Africa, and I said that Africa is the youngest country, or rather continent of the world, she needs to know if the question is, it has the most young people. Sorry, they were 2 speaking at the same time. So today, it is very difficult to believe in what we see on social media, especially with the upcoming of artificial intelligence. We can see so many things that are really real in the video, but then it is really fake. Now, young people need to believe in something in the social media when it comes to science. Science does not lie. We can have a fake news in social media, but then when we talk about metrics and mathematics, this is an accurate science. We are creators of scientific content. We have so many people looking at us, and if we make errors or mistakes, people can just denounce us, condemn us. And when we talk about figures and science, accurate sciences, we cannot believe in social media when there are just news that cannot be verified and checked. So this is my stand. I'll give you half a minute to Nicola. Very quickly, I'll be answering the only question concerning France, and it has nothing to do with media. You gave a very inaccurate image of France because in France we are not counting only on meritocracy. So merit is not the only currency to assess people in France, and today we are less wealthy if compared to before. We are not rich as we used to be, and we are having so many difficulties of flights, and we have visa problems, and this is the case. We need to admit it. And I do believe very deeply, I believe in exchanges, all kinds of exchanges, south-south, north-south, north-north. We need to learn from the others. And I'm looking at foreign countries. I have lived in so many African and Middle Eastern countries and in Europe as well. So I have this international tendency. I do not want to live in only one country and impose my culture, but I'm exchanging constantly. I'm giving you things and you teach me things. And I think this is the way we need to behave. And closing and the isolationism of the Western world that is raised as a problem, it is at the same time an opportunity, because today we have so many models of development and we have so many opportunities and sources of inspiration. One last thing. No, it's not in French. Representative, please, we are stepping in the second panel, and as a moderator of this session, I need to be firm, because we went beyond the allocated time with 15 minutes and there is another session. But before closing up this panel and this session, I would like to thank you all for your contributions and for the insightful information and for your presence. Microphone, please. And the microphone is giving me away. So what I'm saying is that the most important thing is to reiterate the importance of the continuity of this peace conference in Nouakchott, in order to deal with important issues and crucial ones in Africa, concerning diplomacy in Mauritania and so many other aspects. So we thank the organizing committee and we thank His Eminence Ben Beya, and I thank you. Thank you.
السلام عليكم. الو السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. ناخذ استراحة 10 دقائق.
10 minutes a break.